Hey, well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. I'm Manny, and welcome to yet another month of LED webinar. Let me turn it over to Howard. Howard, I'm going to stop sharing. Okay.
Okay.
And let's see. Okay.
Thanks, Manny, for introduction and pushing me into this discussion today, which I actually am passionate about both the topics of lean and safety, and how they can interact and be a benefit for all of us. So I apologize if anyone, if you look at these headlines, you say, why do we care about safety? Well, one of them is, I hope the company you work for, or the companies you work with, depending on how you do things, is really does care about safety. And I don't want to insinuate that the companies on this screen right here, which are all headlines from the last year, don't care about safety. I'm sure they do, but in some cases, they had an incident. And the question for you is, when you see these headlines, if you're working for those companies, or your kids are working for those companies, or your friends are working for those companies, what does it make you think? What does it make you feel? You look at that Pepsi one in the middle there. Workers reaching into live machines at Pepsi bottling plant. It helped avoid production slowdowns and stoppages, but also pose severe amputation risk. If that's really the way the company operates, it's scary. It should be scary to you. It's scary to me. And it's probably scary to potential employers and the fellow employees who are there. Similarly, if you see a few more headlines here, and the headlines actually in the bottom right are all from March, by the way. These are all things that happened in the last month. Uh, the top right corner is just an example of, do you want your company on TV for investigations of OSHA violations? That one, that little blurb there isn't the whole, is actually over 10 years worth of citations, but it gives you a perspective. And these are serious dollars that we talk about when OSHA comes in and finds something. It's a reputational risk. It's an employee focus. There's a lot of things that are negatives. Your customers may take notice. It used to be you could basically sort of hide an OSHA violation, people wouldn't see it. One of the first things I do when I look at companies that I'm about to work with or talk about is I'll look online at their OSHA violations list. I'll look online at their injuries, and I get a feel for how they are as a company. And as you can see here, OSHA can fine you up to $156,000 per violation for a willful or repeated violation. Now, it's rare to get that, but you can. And by the way, if you had 5 machines that were unguarded, or 5 situations with people not doing lockout tagout, those are 5 separate violations and could be treated at 5 times 156,000. So you're talking serious money, and that doesn't even count the cost of what you have to do to fix the problem. Uh, when you think about, a lot of you are quality professionals in different ways and coming out of an ISO 9001, which is where I came out of, also Ford Q1 and other things in my career. Uh, but ISO 9001, I remember learning about it and trying to do it in a much earlier than 2015 variety, but it's about 30 pages. The OSHA manual is actually something I use to prop up my computer screen to the right height, uh, is about 784 pages. When you talk about what it covers, it's roughly 131 shalls. And by the way, this is an internet search. If someone has an exact number, please, contact me later, or chat it to Manny, and he'll let me know later. But I did an internet search, or a word search on it. But 131 shalls versus over 16,000 shalls in the OSHA manual. Uh, I've been through a lot of OSHA training. I'm qualified to teach about that manual. I will never learn all 16,000 shalls. Maybe Ken Jennings or James Hartzauer could go out and read it and memorize it, but I doubt anyone really has memorized it, nor do I want them to. But there's a lot of things that we have to do because OSHA says we must do it in order to protect our employees. Uh, when I look at things like safety and quality, I look at it in terms of, it's part of the picture. And I think that everybody should look at it as, these are things that work to each other. In general terms, I think that most companies that are good at safety are often good at quality and efficiency because a lot of the same habits take place, a lot of the same personal habits, employee habits, company habits, culture take place in order to do that. And so oftentimes, if you're good at one, you're often good at all of them. Doesn't mean you can't make continuous improvement and get better, but it does mean, I think, that in order to focus and be good at any of them, you have to have some of the same disciplines. And we're going to talk about some of those same disciplines today. And when I look at this and I think about it, if you're fighting and saying, well, we can't do it safely, then you're probably not doing it productively either. And if you're really trying to say that there's all these trade-offs, I grant you there are some trade-offs and things or decisions that people make. There's shortcuts people can make, but in the long run, we don't want people to take those shortcuts if they're unsafe. We also don't want to do it if it's going to cause a quality problem. If it's going to do a lot of those things. So they tie together. Uh, I just went through some of the reasons why you want to be, have good safety records in that terms of reputation, risk, money. But in the end, I don't look at safety as, OSHA said we must do it, therefore we have to do it. The answer is yes, OSHA says we have to do things. But we should be thinking about safety in terms of what are we doing because it's the right thing to do. And the right thing to do is, yes, to follow the OSHA regulations. They're there for a reason, and most of them are pretty much in a guideline that's going to help us get safer. But overall, we want to do things because we want our family, want our workers, the people who we work with or work for us, um, to go home safely every day at the end of every day with all their fingers, toes, and everything else without a back injury so they can go, spend the time with their family, themselves. I really hope to replace that bottom Eagles um, thing from 6 years now, 5 6 years ago with a new banner this year, but unfortunately that didn't happen. But there's always next year. But it's just a symbol of what we all want to go home to. We want to go home, and we're working for a reason. Our workers are working for a reason, and oftentimes it's to support what we really want to do in life, which is the things outside of life too, outside of work. Uh, so pulling us back into the lean world, if you think about the 8 wastes of lean and how does that apply to safety? But I look at it and say, uh, all of these apply to safety. If you have too much transportation, people are moving that, or things are being moved, whether that's by forklift, which in its own right has an opportunity to cause vehicle to people traffic. Uh, so there's all different opportunities for things like that. When you think about it, these 8 wastes apply to safety. And so if you go through and say, okay, what is my lean focus? I'll say, what is my lean focus? And now how does this apply to safety? And so too much motion, whether it's people, all these things can happen and lead to instances where we have things and put people in places where they're not comfortable with, or we put people in potential harm's way by doing too many things, even too much inventory. I've walked into a lot of factories and they say, well, we can't move around. We got too much inventory. Well, what happens when that inventory piles up? Well, now that forklift can't see around the corner. That person walks into the forklift zone. So those are things that are not just waste from a quality lean standpoint. Those are potential waste from and factors of safety. So I look at it and think that there's so many similarities between what we do as lean thinking people and things like standard work. Right. We have standard work for a reason. We do it to give people a good quality way of doing things, to do it consistently, to provide training opportunities. Are you incorporating your safety into the standard work? We don't need a separate standard work that includes just quality checks. We can have safety included in those things. So, training is another one. When you're training people, are we training for safety, for quality? Are we training for good operational productivity? Are we training to also include the safety factors in there? And so if we do it well, we can incorporate all these things together and really make them part of the process. So, make it easier, faster, more effective, less costly, and safer. We can do all of those things if we're thinking in a lean mentality. And I'll go into more of these later. So, just some of the examples of it. I'm sure some of you work in companies that have a safety manual as well as a quality manual. Uh, while we want to have and need to have safety procedures in manufacturing and healthcare and so many different industries, and if you're in California, you have an IIPP. There's requirements of different things to have some of these things, to have documentation, to have manuals, have instructions on procedures on lockout, tagout, and lots of other things. It doesn't mean you have to have a separate safety manual from a quality manual. You can have one documentation system. So please think about it in terms of, I think about it in terms of, it's a documentation system, it's a document management system, so that people can retrieve it and understand it and find it. And so we don't need to have a safety manual. You're welcome to, but I recommend just incorporating it together. When you think about layout of your workstations, I'm hoping and expecting that some of you, whether you're doing this through a 5S, 6S type of thing, or whether you're doing it in just the way you look at it, the way you do business, if when you're setting up your workstations, my hope is that you're thinking in terms of various safety factors, not just efficiency factors. And by the way, I'm not trying to promote this particular company or whatever it is, just a picture. But if you think about it in terms of ergonomics, and it's hard for you to see me maybe, but if we have people that are working with their arms above their heads, and you can all take a little break now and raise your arms above your heads and follow me, um, hopefully I assume you're going to feel the strain on your shoulders. Well, that's both, that's an ergonomic factor that we try and avoid when we look at a safe work environment for people. Is how do you get people to not have to do work above their shoulders? How do you get it to do the lifting at the right heights? And so, an adjustable height table and stuff is a great thing from both a productivity standpoint potentially, as well as an ergonomic safety standpoint. And these are opportunities. And so if you as a company are working on things, you can make your workstations both leaner and safer. And I highly recommend you look at all of these from a very critical safety eye, not just a ergonomic, not just a productivity eye. Uh, when this is what we call an accident pyramid, and in this pyramid, if you look at it at the top, it's typical that companies say, when do people do an investigation and a root cause corrective action on an incident? Well, we hope that people do it when they have injuries, certainly. We want people to do it. And a lot of companies will do a root cause, investigate and do a write up and do all sorts of things on a injury. Although by no means all companies do so. A lot of companies just have an injury and then move on. Uh, but we hope that people are doing root cause and really trying to drive and follow the same kind of quality practices. You can do, whether it's 5 Ys or anything else that you're doing, whatever your typical company 8D or anything like that. However, you as a company are doing your root cause corrective actions for quality things, you can follow the same type of principles and should follow the same type of principles for safety. And the same way where you should be doing it for quality, if you're having people have suggestions and near misses, in a sense of, say you had a potential quality issue that was found, we have potential near hits or near misses that people almost get injured. The same kind of thing. How do you investigate them, correct them, and be more proactive? And in this pyramid, we talk about you have 30,000 unsafe acts or behaviors for every major injury or every 30 minor injuries. um, I'll actually say that you have, maybe in some cases, millions of opportunities every day for someone to do something incorrectly in many cases. And, some factories are making hundreds of thousands of things a day or even tens of thousands. But even if you're making only hundreds, there may be tens of thousands of operations that are taking place, movements of material, picking something up. These are all things that potentially are unsafe acts or behaviors, as well as potentially could lead to safety related things. So they all tie together, and I would recommend that we try and be as proactive as possible on this type of pyramid, as well as the same thing in your operational stuff. And the hierarchy of controls follows the same thing, same type of tenor in that. Um, a lot of people say, "Oh, we're wearing safety glasses or we're wearing gloves, therefore it's safe." And it is certainly safer in many cases to be using that PPE versus not using the PPE if you have potential of eye incidents or hand injuries and cuts and stuff. But what would be better if we could raise it up this pyramid? Could we put an engineering control in? Is there shielding or guarding that would help to even take away the potential of somebody having something fly and hit in their eye? Um, do we even have to do it? Do we have to use that chemical at all? And so the higher up this pyramid we can push it, typically the safer we can become, as well as I think a lot of these things fall again into lean in that if you think about it in terms of how many touches do people have? Can we put in something that people don't have to lift up the box at the end of the line, instead it just gets stacked by itself? That's both a safety factor, it could be a quality factor, or a lean factor, or efficiency factor too. So again, these things tie together. Uh, Also, just as I would recommend in the lean world is, how do we make it more visual for our employees? How do we give them the information they need at the source, whether that be standard operating procedures, a 1 point lesson, lockout, tagout examples. Uh, Make it as simple as possible. In our workplaces, also, we end up with a lot of language. We may have people with second languages that are not English, or primary languages that are not English. I'm sure some of you have work in places where English is not the predominant language, but there might be multiple languages. So, how do we make it visual? How do we make it information that people can follow and easily pick up and see, and at the source so that they can do it? Again, the more you can do that, the better I think you are. When I when I look at another tools of lean, the spaghetti diagram, and again, you look at this one that I made up, and it's a whole lot of movement around a lot of different places. And I threw some forklift pictures in there. When you think about the forklift, it is one of the most dangerous tools that a lot of people see. Not that it's inherently dangerous, but it's a big object that weighs 10,000 pounds against a human being who might be walking in the same aisle and across the same path. And who has the right of way? The reality is nobody has the right of way. Pedestrians may say, "Well, I have the right of way. I'm a pedestrian." That's great, but you're still the one that gets injured when something happens. So, we want the forklift person to make eye contact with the human being who is walking, the individual walking, and make a decision as to who goes first. But the more we can take away those interactions, the better off we are. The same way, if you can rearrange this and move it to a much more agreeable spots, you'd have a whole lot less movement, maybe a whole lot less movement with forklifts, a whole lot less people interaction, and it would be both leaner and safer. Uh, I already talked a little about 5S in a sense of ergonomics and layouts, but you know, if you're doing 6S, to me, the first S is safety. Uh, a lot of people will put it as the 6S as the afterthought S, in the sense of it was the last added. It doesn't follow the typical 5S, but it starts with safety. We have an obligation as employers. We have an obligation as friends of our coworkers to try and make it a safe work environment. And so, part of it actually in the way of safety is, if you see something wrong, we should be looking at how people say something and do something about it. And the same way of, whether it's 5S or 6S, either way, whether you call it still 5S, you still should be looking at safety in all aspects of these items. And how we communicate makes a difference as well. Uh, I don't know how many of you have daily meetings, and whether it's some of the safety from a production meeting or whatever that might be on a regular basis. If you do, are you including safety in there? Are you talking about safety the same way you might talk about quality? Are you talking about safety in the same way you might talk about a customer issue? So we want to, the more you talk about these things, the more opportunities people feel comfortable to speak about them, the more we're promoting safety, the more effective that the whole operation can be. So promote it through these safe meetings, promote it through the visual stuff, talk about those incidents and potentials of corrective actions. One of the things that I also encourage, I've worked with some companies that have multiple factories across the country or world that might have very similar pieces of equipment or similar operations. Are you sharing incidents across those operations? Are you sharing the corrective actions across those operations? And unfortunately, the answer to a lot of the time to that is no. So I would say the same thing, of course, with lean and quality improvements too, is how are you leveraging the fact that you have information and you have something similar and you have a similar hazard risk somewhere else? Are we learning from that both inside inside the location as well as at other company locations? And so it's one of those things that the more you can communicate, the more people become aware, more people are involved, the better it is. And so there's lots of different ways of doing that, and the more we can do it, the better off we are typically. Uh, Integrating, if you look at some of these things, Gemba walk. Uh, I don't know, again, Gemba walks are often used in lean environments. When you're doing your Gemba walk and you're observing, we should be observing for lots of things. Is safety one of those things that's in your mind when you're doing that Gemba walk and observing? Uh, so are you integrating and including safety in there? Again, if you as a manager, if you as a auditor, if you as just a fellow employee see something that's unsafe, we want people to speak up and try and make adjustments to that. At the same time, as leaders, as quality leaders, as safety leaders, as whatever you are in your positions, we should be working to include safety in new equipment reviews, safety in new chemical reviews. We do those things because we want to make sure our employees are safe. We also want to make sure that our processes are stable. So again, these are things that how we integrate and just areas that I would recommend you integrate together with safety. Uh, so I've talked about a lot of these lean tools already, and just I had this list of things to do. But think about it in terms of, again, as you're going through each of your different steps in your various journeys of process documentation and journeys of making improvements and continuous improvements. How do we include lean items in there? How do we include safety items in there? And they become integrated together as part of the process. So why do we do it? Well, I already talked about some of the reputational risks earlier, some of those headlines that I would expect that all of you want to avoid. It certainly is not a good thing from that, but there's also real costs. There's direct cost, and we often think of those direct costs in terms of what's our workers' compensation costs. And I put together some list of some numbers that I've found in various searches for what is a typical injury cost. And some of that might be the medical cost of it. Some of that might be the claim to compensation to employees. But these are serious dollars that are direct costs that, yes, my workers' compensation insurance company will pay on my behalf in most companies. Some of you might be self-insured, so it might be really that it's a direct out of your pocket. But even if you don't pay it this year, you'll pay it in future years because your insurance rates will go up by having more claims. So those are direct costs. It's the indirect costs that really, that often truly add up. Think about what the opportunities are of having employees that are injured. Uh, you now have people that are working overtime in order to cover for somebody, or you have to hire and train somebody. And most of you will probably realize and expect and experience that training new employees is not easy. You often have more quality problems. You often have more injuries from new employees. You often have more issues with that. It's a drain on the system. Or people are working overtime and then get grumbled, and they see someone, they see Tom or Sue or whoever is out injured, and I'm working hard and they're getting paid to sit at home and watch Oprah. Well, I guess not Oprah anymore. Watch whatever is on. I have no idea what's on daytime TV these days, but watch the Oprah equivalent or the View or whatever it might be, while I'm working hard at my job and having to cover for them. So you lose productivity. You sometimes may miss a customer order because Tom or Sue was the only person that knew how to run that machine. So these are real costs. These are indirect costs. And so there's that customer satisfaction. There's all different types of things that can happen with injuries that we just want to avoid. It's a drain on your system, and it's not good. So how do you apply it? I've talked about a lot of different ways already, but to me, when you look at it and say, we want to have good business processes, they should all be, if whatever business processes you have, they should be thinking in terms of safety, in terms of quality, in terms of lean. So how do we do things from a standard work standpoint? How do we, I already talked about root cause corrective action, incorporating maintenance, whether you do preventive maintenance or other things. These are both ways that hopefully make things both more effective, more efficient, productive, leaner, as well as safer. Uh, and when you think about, how do we do, ultimately what we're trying to create in many cases is a safe culture where employees are working together, where employees are working with, uh, for the goal of having a safe environment. Again, I will substitute the word quality in the same terms, is that I think when employees are working in a safe culture and proactively making it a safe culture, my guess is and experience is that they're often doing the same exact thing in the terms of quality because they're showing a care. The company is showing a care towards them. They're showing a care towards their job. And I truly believe that most employees, nearly all of them, show up every day with the intent of doing a good job. And occasionally someone proves me wrong, or tries to at least prove me wrong. But in general terms, people show up with the intent of doing a good job because they were going to take personal pride in it. And we want to encourage that both in a safe culture and a good quality culture, a good lean culture too. So the payback ultimately, employee satisfaction, think about the reputational stuff we talked about earlier. But in this environment, how hard is it to find new employees? How hard is it to find good new employees? We want to retain those employees. We want to have that people engaged. I was reading something recently where it talked about employees that are engaged are 22% more likely to be whatever, better employees, we'll call them, whatever the term was that they use. But uh, safety, lean are all ways that we can create engagement with employees that keeps them part of the process, that keeps them part of engaged in the benefits and the goals of the company. And ultimately, those are positives that we can create that culture that just drives improvements in all different areas, both including safety. Certainly have those direct and indirect costs we also talked about, and these things tie together. So if we can have that safe environment, if we can promote and include safety in these areas, you have a higher likelihood, in my observations and experience, to have a better safe environment versus a better retention, better culture, better all those things. I've been in places where it wasn't a nice, clean, safe environment, and their retention in the first days was pretty poor. And that's not the only reason. There's lots of things that lead to it. But if you're working in an environment that doesn't have air conditioning and whatever else, and you see that there's a lot of safety factors to go along with it, it makes you want to look for that next job. And we want to certainly try to avoid those types of things. Uh, when this is a quote that someone said to me early in my career at a job that I was relatively new at. And the U wasn't intended to me personally. The U was intended to me as part of management. And the employee was correct. You only care about quality in slow season. You only care about output in busy season. And the reality is that this employee was correct from a lot of different ways, that the company heritage was in the slow season, and there was definitely a seasonal aspect of the business. Slow season quality was real important, and the rest of the year, boy, output at any cost. Um, and they could have said the word about safety too. And our goal as a management team was to change the perception, change the culture. And it took a couple of years to really enact the culture where if I asked that same person, they wouldn't have said that. Uh, but it's the same thing, and there should be no seasonality for quality. There should be no seasonality for safety. Should be no seasonality in a sense for lean, right? We want to do things and we want to keep it in perspective and change that worker's perception that we as a company, you as an individual, it's everything is an individual, right? It's you may work for a company, you may work for yourself, but each individual has an opportunity to make a change and make a difference, and we should all care about safety and quality all the time. So a few takeaways as we're nearing the end, and I'm a little fast. It's sort of hard to gauge everything, but ultimately integrate that lean into your various processes. So do it through your work instructions, do it through the procedures, the ergonomic views, everything that you can possibly, think about in terms of lean, in terms of operational improvements, in terms of just standard operating procedures. We should be including lean and safety. We should talk about it. Should be a part of that culture of continuous improvement. Should be included in there, and so we should be integrating safety into the normal business practices as much as possible, including the employees in that. If you don't have a safety committee that's active, or if you don't have a safety committee at all, if you don't have a safety committee that is active and effective, I encourage you both either to start one or to work to make it more effective. Get people involved. And it's not only a safety committee. There's lots of different ways we can get people involved in continuous improvement, in ways we can get people involved in safety improvements to be part of it. Um, Safety committees are just one of them that I find effective if done well. And these things lead to us saving money. It can be direct costs, it can be indirect costs. Uh, it shouldn't be a competition between we can make it leaner and we can make it safer. They should be going together. We can make it quality, we can make it safety. These aren't necessarily typically, they don't have to be in competition. We should be able to do both, and we should feel a need that we can't compromise on the safety aspect in order to do it well. Uh, and if we do all those things well, that culture can be created. We can have that better retention. We can have that better employee satisfaction. We hopefully are sending our fellow employees and our friends home safe every single day. And that should be part of our goal. We want to be in compliance. I mean, that's a given. OSHA's there, but the reality is that OSHA won't be on the doorsteps of most companies. It's pretty rare. There's only so many OSHA officers. They show up if there's a problem. It's not that often that OSHA is really there. They're the punitive monster behind us, perhaps. They're the scary monster, but it doesn't mean that's why we're doing it. We're doing it because it's the right thing to do, and it helps us be effective as a company. And we can do it in a lean way to make it effective in both ways. So um, I
Well,
found the chat, so I'll start looking through it.
good, good. Yeah, there were some good ones. Early on, there was a personal story about a zinc plant, I think it was. It was a while ago now. But a
Okay.
death zinc plant, of course, that's always memorable, let's just say, um,
Okay. So
for lots of reasons.
I'll go from the bottom here. What does an effective safety committee look like? To me, an effective safety committee is someone as a group that is communicating about things in a way that people are involved. People are doing audits. You are as a group leading those audits to corrective actions, not just talking about them and passing them on. Uh, where people are involved, and hopefully in the best of them are getting other people involved that aren't on the safety committee. So there's some people that are going to go out and just do their audit and turn it in the papers and then walk away and come to the meeting once a month, and they'll maybe say 3 words about it and then that's it. versus the people that will get involved in talking with their fellow employees, promoting safety, uh, and working towards being really a partner in making changes and making it effective and being representative for the areas they're working in and uh, so the best committees are ones that are going out there and talking about things and getting involved in implementing things as well as getting other people involved to get those ideas. And so hopefully, Amanda, that gives you a little perspective. I've done actually quite a bit of training with safety committees in different places, and uh, you know, I think they can be a very effective tool. And I also would suggest that if you do have an effective safety committee, you rotate people on and off of them so that you get more people involved. So even if you have a highly effective one, it's good to rotate a few new people in and then get more people that have that safety mentality and get a chance to benefit from the process. Uh, so Walker said we use MDI process to manage safety, just like quality and delivery. What would be the top 5 or top 10 metrics to work towards? MDI is, what does MDI stand for, Manny? Do you know? Or Walker?
Manual data
Management.
input,
Okay.
basically like Excel.
He says
Okay.
managing daily improvement. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Uh, top 5 or 10 metrics to work towards from a safety standpoint. That is one of the challenges of safety. And I took out a slide that I've used in other presentations that talked about metrics of safety. Um, Certainly there are people who will look at the trailing metrics of what's my injuries, my TRIR, my total recordable injury rate, which is what the OSHA recordable injury rates, essentially, whether it's the total recordable injury rate or what they call the DART rate, the injuries that have days lost and restricted time. OSHA tracks that. Those are metrics that you can see and compare yourself to as an industry. So if you're in the plastics industry, you look up your NAICS code 326199. I happen to have it memorized because I work with some plastics companies. And you can see that their industry average for TRIR is whatever 2.6, which means that for every 100 employees, there's an average of 2.6 injuries per year for that number of for every 100 typical employees, and 100 employees, by the way, typically work about 200,000 work hours. So it's a simple math. It's a trailing metric. You should all be doing it and looking at it, but it's a trailing metric. And my suggestion is when you look at that, don't be saying, hey, it's March of 2023, so I'm only going to look at January and February 2023 to see that metric. I would look at it at least as a trailing 12 months and a rotating, rolling 12 months type of thing. Um, but regardless of that, I look at even from other things. I look at which body parts, what type of injuries. I want to look at near misses, not just injuries. I want to look at the near misses. What people call near misses. In some cases, they were hits, but they weren't injured, right? So some of them are really hits, but they just didn't happen to cause a recordable injury. Uh, Look at things that the safety committee is reporting, audits, what corrective actions were done. So we can be a little more proactive too in looking at forward thinking metrics as well. And so think about things like we were supposed to do 20 audits, 10 audits a month. Are we doing those audits? Are we finishing corrective actions? Um, are we doing the inspection? So there can be some forward thinking metrics as well. And I have that in another slide that I probably have other ideas that I'll have to maybe come back to if I get a chance to look at it here. But
Okay.
um,
I'm looking at the chat now again. I got it back. So did you see there's a couple of how do you convince people that this is the right thing to do when money or threatening is not going to be the answer, right? I mean, one of them's the
yeah,
CEO. Like, how do you tell? That's the problem, right?
right.
Or
It's
the other one about a government agency, like money doesn't matter.
right. Well, they're in some cases. I mean, money may not matter to them, but let's go to the CEO side of it versus the government because the government may be a different world, but because because OSHA, some of the government actually doesn't have to follow the rules. Uh, but from a CEO standpoint of most typical companies, we have to hope that if you have to really convince them that safety matters, then of course that's a red flag of some areas, but we should still try. Um, and part of that is there's a reputational risk and there's a customer risk. Uh, and really what we hope that we can convince them of is that it's really more about doing the right thing for our employees. These are things that can happen, and some of the times it can happen. Now, the question becomes, as a company, what are you doing to prevent that from happening? And getting people engaged to prevent it is not easy. The first thing, just as in lean, sometimes the first thing is recognizing the hazard. Right? We want to recognize, if people can recognize the hazard, we're more likely to be willing to fix the hazard. It's when people ignore the hazards or ignore the quality problem or ignore the opportunities that are there to make improvements. Uh, that's when we're at the most risk at times because we didn't recognize the hazard. And so we want to recognize those hazards. And as leaders and thought leaders, whether quality, lean, whatever your position, you're here at this type of meeting today because you're someone who wants to get better. You're making personal investments in yourself. Because I doubt it's for the 1/10 of an RU. It's just not worth it. So we're here. You're here for a reason, and I would expect that most, if not all of you, have the opportunity to be able to prevent and point these things out and really start thinking about things in terms of hazards. So one of the things that we train towards in the safety committee, what I train for in OSHA 10 and 30-hour classes, is identification of hazards.
Hmm.
And that's a big factor. If you can identify a hazard, we now have the means to at least start thinking about how to address it. If we fail to identify it, we don't start addressing it. And the same exact thing happens in lean worlds. And so we talk to people, we observe things, doing that Gemba walk, being observational of, I would say that I can't tell you the color of the paint on my walls at home. I truly can't. I mean, I'm looking at the wall right now. Now I can, but I had no idea the wall I stare at all damn day. I really did not know what color it was until I just looked at it. But when I walk through a factory, I'm observing people. I'm seeing people do things. And that's part of identifying hazards, identifying conditions, identifying unsafe acts. Um, it's all part of being good at safety.
Hmm. Okay.
Um,
Well, I think, Howard, what a lot of it comes down to at the end of the day really is it's culture. It's the what's in it for me, and we've been talking lately, we've been kicking around the idea of creating this kind of graphics that go on a bathroom mirror, that look like a picture frame. And at the top, there's a legend that says, "This is how your family wants you to get home today." You know, like
yep.
presumably, the same as you left, right? All
Yeah.
digits, all body parts,
Yep. Yeah.
So.
I worked with a company that had on the back of their badge, I work for whatever. Actually, I was just in a company last week that had a bulletin board of people's pictures of their family at home. It was a union shop, by the way. So someone, that's about union. So I was in a union facility, but they had a bulletin board. Now, the good part is they had it. The bad part was they probably didn't have enough pictures up there because I saw about 30 pictures, 40 pictures in that area, and there probably should have been 50 or 60 pictures up in that area. But those that chose to, are thinking in exactly those terms. They want to go home and see their family. And as an employer, um, of any type, I hope we want people to feel enough camaraderie with our fellow employees and humanity with our fellow employees that we want them all to go home safe every day.
Well, that's what it is, Howard. At the end of the day, really, my definition of a culture is simple. It's the way people agree to treat each other. And, so just because I don't work with you every day doesn't mean that I'm not thinking about, when we're setting up an area, like, how are you going to service it? Okay. How are people going to get more material, or how are you going to remove things from there? It's just, it's sort of inherent. So I almost struggle a bit even with success because to me it's like even beyond that. Like
Yep.
it's just part of the human condition. I don't know.
Well, it is and it should be.
It's just
It's a
yeah.
matter of reminding ourselves that it's important. And you know, Frank Murdoch just added something in the chat. Every capital equipment project needs to include a health and safety assessment to identify potential risks where things like guarding, et cetera, will be added to projects. It's, you know, it's same as I said, you know, the new equipment, new capital equipment, new chemicals. These are reviews that good companies make sure that you have things in place. You know, the quality is there, that the product expected, that you're ready from an engineering standpoint, and you're ready from a safety standpoint. Um, I was at a company and walking through a company where they were proud. They showed me this new piece of equipment they had put in, and it solved one safety issue. It solved
Mhm.
a safety issue. It also was good for quality and for production. It was great, except for they didn't pay attention to, there was an exhaust fan with an outlet with a vent on one side that they put exactly in the path at my ear level
Ooh.
of where I walk through, right on a main pathway around that piece of equipment.
Wow,
Okay,
you had
so
some
they put this
baffle or
new piece
something.
of equipment that had a great safety improvement, but they didn't take a look at the picture. And the big picture was they created actually a worse hazard for more people who were walking by it than they did for this problem they solved. Now, it wasn't that hard to solve it and fix it once again. We identified the hazard, but they should have done that up front. They should have done it up front. They should have done it when they installed it. There should have been a safety review, and there wasn't.
So I used to work for a Fortune 500 company where they had plants around the world. And within 12 hours of an accident, the CEO expected a phone call of what happened. Could have lost time or not, didn't matter. Um, with a coherent explanation of what happened.
Yep.
So let me tell you, you know, you want to talk about the guy at the top, like holding everybody to it. That's how you get it done. We keep saying it's the guy at the top, and I've seen it happen.
Ram Kumar, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing the name, suggested something about metrics again and looking at trending the risks. One of the things he talked about was safety observations, BBS audits, et cetera, is just another metric that if you're doing it is another thing that behavior-based safety is same, just another version of an observation again
Right.
of how are people doing things, because we have unsafe acts, we have unsafe behaviors, we have unsafe conditions, and from a safety standpoint, we have to address all of them. And again, I look at it and say there's so many ways of doing it, and lean and safety together work together that way. Connect with me on LinkedIn or email me.
All right, folks. Couple things I want to talk about here, real quick. Obviously, there was that. Let's see. Here is an eight waste poster, actually, that I had mentioned. I threw the link out there, so you can take that and do what you will with it. But preferably, I hope that you will hang it someplace where you want to start a conversation about improvement. The last thing I wanted to talk about too was again our June webinar with Paul Akers. I'll be there. You know, the question is, will you? So enjoy, folks. Uh, do please let me know how things are going. And
And,
all right, folks, remember we are looking for presenters. Otherwise, you wouldn't have to see Howard and me next month. So
and
please
come
think
see us
about
at
it.
WCQI in May as well.
We're going to appear to be everywhere in the next few months, especially LinkedIn and my ASQ. Enjoy, folks.
Okay,
Have a good day.
bye.
Bye now.